I want you to close your eyes for a second, Will. Uh, Obviously not if you're driving or operating heavy machinery, but you get the idea.
Right. Keep your eyes on the road if you're driving.
Yeah, please do. But I want you to imagine opening your banking app on your phone.
Yeah.
You wait a second for it to load, the little Face ID animation spins, and you look at your checking and savings balance.
Just staring right at that number.
Exactly. And I want you to imagine a specific number sitting there, a number that, fundamentally changes the way your shoulders rest, a number that actually changes how deeply you sleep at night.
It's a really powerful visual, honestly.
It is. And according to this really fascinating piece of behavioral finance analysis we received today, that magic number, it isn't $1 million.
No, it's not.
It's not $500,000. It's not even $100,000. That magic number is exactly $10,000.
Which, it sounds almost aggressively simple when you say it out loud like that.
Right. It seems almost too low.
Yeah, it does. But what's fascinating here is that this specific threshold, it represents this profound psychological and mathematical tipping point. This analysis we're digging into today beautifully deconstructs that shift.
Yeah, it really breaks it down.
It really does.
Yeah.
Because the core argument is that hitting your first 10,000, it isn't just about the literal balance in your account.
Right.
It is the exact milestone where your entire relationship with money shifts from being purely reactive, where, just happens to you, to becoming proactive.
Okay, let's unpack this, because if this analysis is accurate, we might be looking at everyday money completely wrong.
Oh, absolutely.
So our mission for this deep dive is to figure out the mechanics of why this relatively modest amount of cash completely rewires your brain and your life.
Yeah, because it's not framed as just a nice cushion.
Exactly. It's presented as a completely different operating system for your day-to-day existence.
Mm-hmm. Right. And the framework breaks this transformation down into very concrete behavioral stages. We aren't looking at vague, feel-good financial advice here.
No, not at all.
The analysis maps out the specific psychological relief and the stark mathematical realities that just kick in the moment you cross a 5-figure net worth.
So let's start with the immediate psychological impact, because the first thing that happens is this, massive reclamation of mental bandwidth.
Huge mental shift, yeah.
And the analysis illustrates this by looking at how emergencies fundamentally change shape. The example used is a $1,200 transmission repair for your car, or maybe an unexpected medical bill.
Which is incredibly common, right?
Totally. So before you have $10,000 saved, what does that $1,200 surprise actually do to your life?
Well, it operates as a full-blown life crisis.
A total disaster.
Exactly.
Yeah.
If we connect this to the broader field of behavioral psychology, living without that buffer means you are operating under a constant state of baseline fear.
Baseline fear. That's such a heavy term.
It is, but it's accurate. When you have zero savings, you know that at any moment, a single pothole or, a strange noise from your engine or a trip to the urgent care clinic.
Any of that could just wreck you.
Right. It could destabilize your entire month or even your entire year.
And the stress isn't just emotional, it's structural.
Yeah.
You physically don't have the cash to make the problem go away.
That lack of liquidity is the trap. Because you don't have the cash, that $1,200 bill ends up on a high-interest credit card.
Ugh, the worst.
And from that moment on, the emergency begins to compound against you. You are suddenly paying for a broken transmission for months, maybe years.
You're paying for yesterday's problems with tomorrow's time.
Precisely. You are actively sacrificing your future income to pay for a past emergency. And the cognitive load of that is just immense. Scarcity actually changes human brain function.
Wait, really? It actually changes your brain?
Yes. When you are constantly calculating how to survive the week, you suffer a temporary drop in functional IQ. You get tunnel vision.
Wow, that is wild.
But once you have that $10,000 safety net, that exact same event, the transmission blowing out, is reduced to a temporary annoyance.
Right, just an inconvenience.
Yeah. You swipe your debit card, the car is fixed, and your life continues on exactly the same trajectory it was on the day before.
It makes me think of playing an intensely difficult video game.
Oh, I like this. Go on.
Okay, so imagine you're playing a game where your character only has, a tiny sliver of health left. The health bar is practically empty. The screen is flashing red. There's that stressful, accelerating heartbeat sound effect playing in the background.
It's just pure anxiety.
Pure anxiety. Every single minor obstacle in the game feels fatal. You can't explore the map. You can't take risks. You can't even enjoy the environment.
Because you're just trying not to die.
Exactly. You are just creeping along, totally panicked, playing entirely on the defensive because one wrong move and it's game over.
That's a perfect analogy.
That is what living under that $10,000 mark feels like. The fear dictates your every single move.
Right, your choices are entirely restricted by your vulnerability. Every decision is filtered through the lens of immediate survival rather than long-term strategy.
But hitting that $10,000 mark is like finally picking up a full health potion.
You get a full health bar.
Yeah, you get a full health bar. You aren't invincible. I mean, a dragon could still swoop down and take you out, like a massive catastrophic event could still hurt you financially. But you can bump into a few smaller enemies and you're totally fine.
The flashing red screen goes away.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Eliminating this baseline fear frees up an incredible amount of daily mental bandwidth. You aren't standing in the grocery store aisle doing complex mental math to figure out if you can afford to fix a flat tire and still eat on Thursday.
And if we think about what you can do with that reclaimed cognitive energy, it's really staggering.
Yeah.
Yeah, when you aren't devoting all your brain power to simply surviving the week, you can actually start planning for the year. Shedding that baseline fear is the necessary prerequisite for looking outward at your environment and figuring out how to optimize it.
So if getting rid of that baseline fear gives you your brain back, where does all that reclaimed mental energy go?
That is the million-dollar question, or, well, the $10,000 question.
Right. And for most people, it immediately goes toward the place they spend 40 hours a week, their day job.
Yes.
This analysis talks heavily about how hitting this financial milestone buys you what it calls option value in your career.
Option value is perhaps one of the most empowering concepts we're looking at today.
I found it super interesting.
It addresses the fundamental trap of paycheck-to-paycheck living. When you require next Friday's paycheck simply to cover rent and keep the lights on, you have zero leverage in your professional life.
Okay, I have to push back here, though, or at least play devil's advocate for a second.
Sure, let's hear it.
If someone is making minimum wage, or they're trapped in one of those toxic jobs we're about to talk about, telling them to just, quote unquote, save $10,000 sounds completely out of touch.
Oh, absolutely.
Does this analysis acknowledge how mathematically grueling this is for someone who's living paycheck to paycheck?
It absolutely does, and that's a crucial distinction to make. The analysis doesn't present the first $10,000 as a casual undertaking.
Like it's just going to happen by skipping latte.
Right. No. In fact, it explicitly labels the first $10,000 as the notoriously hardest money you will ever save in your entire life.
The hardest money.
Yes. It is mathematically grueling. It requires immense sacrifice, aggressive budgeting, and often taking on extra shifts or side labor. It is pure sweat equity.
It's a grind.
It's a massive grind, but the analysis argues that the sheer difficulty of accumulating that initial capital is exactly why it grants so much power once you have it.
Okay, that makes sense. The difficulty is the point.
Exactly.
So let's look at the power it buys. Because $10,000 is not, retire to a private island money.
Definitely not.
It's not even take a year off to find yourself in Europe money.
No, it won't sustain you indefinitely.
But it is walk away from a bad Tuesday money.
I love that phrase.
Right. It's, I don't have to tolerate being screamed at in this conference room money. So how does having a few months of rent actually change your daily posture in a meeting? Walk me through the mechanics of that confidence.
Well, it changes the mechanics of negotiation by altering the balance of power.
Oh, yeah.
In any professional relationship, the party who is most willing to walk away holds the leverage.
That makes total sense.
Right. And when you have zero savings, your employer knows, either consciously or subconsciously, that you are dependent on them for your immediate survival.
They know you can't quit.
Exactly. This dynamic forces people to accept incredibly bad working conditions. You endure toxic bosses, you tolerate being underpaid, you take on stagnant roles simply because the threat of missing a paycheck is existential.
You're financially cornered.
You are. But $10,000 provides a runway.
A way out.
Yes. Now, the exact duration of that runway depends heavily on your local cost of living, but regardless of where you are, it buys you time. And because you have time, your posture changes. You can walk into a performance review and ask for a raise, not from a place of desperation, but from a place of knowing your market value.
Because if they say no?
If they say no, or if the environment becomes hostile, you have the financial breathing room to spend the next 3 months quietly applying for better jobs while still employed.
Or just quit.
Exactly. Or simply resign if the situation is severely damaging your mental health.
It's the ability to say no without destroying your life.
That is the essence of option value. You can reject bad deals. You can take calculated professional risk.
Like changing careers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe you want to transition to a new, more fulfilling industry that requires a slight pay cut initially. Or maybe you want to start a side business that requires some upfront capital and time.
Which you just can't do if you're broke.
You cannot make those pivots if you are terrified of missing a single utility bill. The $10,000 acts as a financial shock absorber that lets you make career moves based on long-term growth and personal satisfaction rather than just, short-term survival.
Okay, so the first $10,000 secures your peace of mind. It turns off the flashing red health bar we talked about, and it secures your career autonomy by giving you leverage.
Right.
But here's where it gets really interesting, because up until this point, we've only been talking about what happens when the money just sits there acting as a shield.
Just a static buffer.
Yeah. What happens when the money itself actually starts working alongside you?
This brings us to a major paradigm shift in how individuals perceive wealth generation. Earlier, we established that the first $10,000 is pure brute force saving.
Sweating it out.
Right. 100% of it comes from raw effort. You traded your time and your physical or mental labor for every single dollar and then actively chose not to spend it. Compounding hasn't factored in at all.
You lifted every single pound of that weight yourself.
But once you cross that threshold, a mathematical pivot occurs. The analysis looks at what happens when you take that accumulated capital and deploy it.
Deploy it how?
Well, if you take that $10,000 and invest it in broad market index funds, the historical average return is around 7 to 8% annually, adjusted for inflation.
Okay, we hear the term index fund thrown around a lot, but let's break down the actual mechanism for a second so it doesn't just sound like, magic internet money.
Good idea.
What is actually happening to that 10 grand?
When you buy a broad market index fund, you are essentially purchasing fractional ownership in hundreds of the most successful, profitable companies in the world.
Okay, so you own a tiny piece of them.
You are buying a tiny slice of global productivity. When those companies sell a smartphone or a cup of coffee or a software subscription, they generate a profit.
Right.
Because you own a micro fraction of those companies, you are entitled to a micro fraction of that profit. Your money is no longer just a static number in a checking account, slowly losing its purchasing power to inflation.
It's doing something.
Yes, it is actively participating in the global economy.
And the math on that participation is wild when you step back and look at it. Because, 7 to 8% on $10,000 means that money is generating around $700 to $800 a year.
Exactly.
And to be abundantly clear, that is $700 to $800 a year that you didn't have to lift a single finger for.
None at all.
You didn't clock in, you didn't commute, you didn't deal with a toxic manager.
The capital is producing more capital without any additional labor on your part.
The phrase used in the analysis is that your money begins to act, quote, like an employee. And I am literally visualizing this.
That's a great visual.
Like, imagine you hit that 10K mark, and suddenly you get to hire a tiny, incredibly tireless employee.
Just a little worker.
Yeah, just a little guy in a tiny suit. And he works 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. Never stops. He never takes a sick day. He never complains about the coffee in the break room. He doesn't ask for PTO. He just grinds in the background of your life.
That's right.
And at the end of every single year, this tiny employee walks up to you and hands you $800 in cash.
It's an amusing visual for sure, but structurally, it is a perfect representation of how capital works.
And sure, someone might listen to this and think, well, $800 isn't going to buy me a mansion.
No, it's not.
But think about what it does buy. That might pay for your entire car insurance premium for the year, or a full month of groceries. Your tiny employee just covered an entire category of your annual budget while you were sleeping.
And that realization triggers a profound behavioral shift.
Mm-hmm.
When you fundamentally understand that your money can work beside you, it alters your internal incentive structure.
How so?
Well, you transition from saving money merely to hide it away for a rainy day to acquiring capital so you can hire more of these tiny employees.
Oh, I love that.
Right. You start thinking about building an entire workforce of capital.
Which brings us perfectly to the final realization of this deep dive. Because once you understand the math of this new employee working for you, it reveals the blueprint for scaling up to massive wealth.
It really does.
Let's look at the pipeline. From $10,000 to $100,000.
This is where the analysis synthesizes everything into a unified theory of wealth building. Reaching that first $10,000 required building real, tangible financial discipline.
We talked about how grueling it is.
Exactly. You had to learn how to track your cash flow, automate your savings, and consistently resist impulse spending. You had to master the psychology of delayed gratification.
You had to become a fundamentally different person than the version of you who spent every dollar that came in.
Spot on. And here is the counterintuitive secret to long-term wealth. The journey from $10,000 to $100,000 relies on those exact same principles and habits.
Okay, I really want to emphasize this because I think a lot of people assume that wealthy people have access to some, secret, highly complex playbook.
Oh, almost everyone assumes that.
There's this pervasive myth that to get to 10,000, you just use a basic budget. But to get to 100,000 or a million, you need to start trading complex options or buying distressed real estate or, staring at 6 monitors full of candlestick stock charts.
The whole Wolf of Wall Street fantasy.
Right. Why do we assume wealth has to be so complicated?
We assume it has to be complicated because the reality of wealth building is incredibly boring.
Boring.
Yes. Human beings are drawn to complexity and shortcuts. But the mechanics of financial discipline do not change as your net worth grows.
So you just keep doing the same stuff.
You continue tracking your cash flow, you continue automating your savings, you continue resisting impulse spending. The daily behavioral inputs are identical.
It is almost disappointing, but also very encouraging.
Right. The only thing that changes is the mathematical output, because compound growth is now accelerating the timeline for you.
Because now you have your original labor, plus the tiny employees helping you push the boulder up the hill.
Exactly. Let's look at the practical math over time. If you are saving $500 a month from your wages, getting to that first $10,000 takes nearly 2 years of pure grueling effort.
A long 2 years.
But as you march toward $100,000, you aren't just relying on your $500 a month anymore. Your $10,000 is generating $800 a year.
And it grows.
It grows. Eventually, your $50,000 is generating $4,000 a year. The snowball is rolling downhill, picking up its own snow. You are still executing the exact same mundane habits, but the system is scaling itself through the power of compounding.
So what does this all mean for you listening? Let's recap the incredible trajectory this analysis just walked us through.
It's a heck of a journey.
It really is. You start at zero, living under the crushing weight of baseline fear, where a $1,200 emergency is a catastrophic, high-interest life crisis that actually limits your cognitive function.
The tunnel vision.
Right. Through raw effort, sweat equity, and building the rigorous habits of tracking and automating, you grind out that notoriously brutal first $10,000. The moment you hit it, you get your mental bandwidth back.
The crisis shrinks.
Yep, it shrinks into a temporary annoyance. Armed with that safety net, you unlock option value in your career. You gain the leverage to walk away from toxic environments and negotiate for your future.
Which is huge.
Then, you deploy that capital into the market, hiring it as a tireless employee that generates hundreds of dollars a year while you sleep. And finally, you realize you don't need to invent a new, complicated strategy to reach $100,000.
No secret playbook.
You just keep running the exact same boring, effective play while compound interest speeds up the clock.
It is a remarkable trajectory, and, analyzing these stages together raises a final thought that goes beyond the immediate scope of the analysis, but builds directly on its core argument.
Oh, I love a good final thought. What is it?
Well, think about this. If the daily habits required to go from $0 to $10,000 are the exact same behaviors needed to reach $100,000 and beyond, how might our entire culture change if financial education stopped obsessing over complex wealth strategies and instead focused entirely on the behavioral psychology of crossing that very first $10,000 finish line?
Wow. If we just solved for that first 10K and gave people their mental bandwidth back, the rest of the math kind of takes care of itself.
Exactly.
That is a fantastic question for all of us to chew on. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into the psychology of the first 10,000. Keep tracking, keep automating, and keep exploring. We'll catch you on the next one.